Welcome to Exploring the Unexpected. In today's episode, we're exploring Virginia, Minnesota, and a tasty little bakery. Discovering new experiences with wonderful friends in Ely, Minnesota. Spending some time up close and personal with some gorgeous wolves. And visiting a lighthouse on the shores of Lake Superior. After a good night's sleep, but a little bit of a slow start in the morning, I left the West Two Rivers campground and headed in to explore the town of Virginia, Minnesota. But before I got too far into exploring, I really was hungry and needed to find something to eat. Man, I hope I'm not getting here too late, but I've been told that this little bakery has some really good stuff in it. Not quite as early as I wanted to get here, but let's go check it out and see if there's anything tasty to have. The answer is yes, and almost immediately my mouth began to water and I realized I was going to have a little bit of trouble picking out exactly what I was going to eat this morning. Okay, so I got an almond strudel and a blueberry croissant with cream cheese. God, these look so good.
Okay, let's give this a try. Oh my gosh, look how good that looks. Oh, it's got thin layers of dough. Oh, it is delicious. All right. Okay, now I'm gonna try the blueberry one. Oh, that blueberry filling is heavenly. The croissant's not as flaky as I thought. It's a little bit soft, but with all the moisture from the blueberry and the filling, I'm not surprised. But it's also absolutely tasty. I would absolutely come back here again.
There are some really cool displays from the history of the bakery. And to tell you the truth, I really wish I could have paid some of these historic prices. As I wandered around downtown, I found some cool old buildings, some sweet old signs, and some beautiful murals. But what really caught my eye was this very old abandoned building. And moreover, what the heck is the structure up there on top? With no answer to that mystery, I headed over to the Veterans Memorial Park. Gareth Andrews' spectacular sculpture, Shoulder to Shoulder, Even the Fallen Stand Tall, honor those who have served in our armed forces and made the ultimate sacrifice. As I rolled out of town, the county courthouse caught my eye and I had to pull over to go see if there was anything interesting inside. Unfortunately, the entryway was about the most interesting thing in there. By the end of the day, I planned to make it to Ely, Minnesota, but on my way, I stopped at the Bois Forte Heritage Center of the Ojibwa. The Bois Forte Band of the Ojibwa, or Chippewa, settled in the Great Lakes region near the most abundant wild rice-producing area in North America. The museum celebrates the culture, heritage, history, and resilience of the Bois Forte Ojibwe. The museum also highlights one of the dark elements of the westward expansion of the United States. I had one more stop to make before getting to Ely. In the tiny town of Tower, there was a train museum, and I was headed to check it out. It looked crazy promising when I showed up, but wouldn't you know, the museum was closed on this day. While I was bummed that the museum was closed, you know me, I was gonna go check things out and see, well, what I could get into. Fortunately, the locomotive was open, and I did have to go inside and take a little look around and check out all this old machinery. It's always so much fun to come in and look at this and wonder about the people years and years ago that used to operate these machines, pushing tons and tons of iron down a railroad track to its destination. While the other cars were locked up, I was able to snap a few decent pictures of the insides. Perhaps I'll come back someday and check it out in more detail. Across the street was a building that had, well, it had seen better days, but it looked like at some point it was a bar. So I thought, well, let's go see if it's still a functioning establishment and maybe stop in and have a beer. The keep out signs made me think otherwise, and I thought, well, it's just time to get back on the road. As I rolled out of town, I thought I saw a Mustang on a trailer, but no, that's actually the car. I have no idea what those people were thinking. I got back on the road and headed to Ely, Minnesota, where my wonderful friends Lynn and Eric were waiting to introduce me into everything they love about living in northern Minnesota. And it turned into an absolutely amazing and wonderful experience with them. They introduced me to canoeing in the Boundary Waters Wilderness. This area is 1,000 times more beautiful and peaceful than these photos could ever show. And we saw pictographs that you can only access via canoe. We also headed over to some of their friends' house to try Finnish sauna. I can tell you, this boy from Kansas would have never thought that he would have gone into a little building in the woods, gotten completely naked with a group of people he barely knew, and then stepped into a room that was over 200 degrees. Water is then tossed onto superheated rocks over on the furnace to produce wave after wave of superheated steam. You then head outside, still completely naked, and hop into this crystal clear, beautiful, but chilly lake and swim around for a while. And then you get out and you repeat the process all over again. It was an absolutely heavenly, wonderful experience, and I'd definitely do it again. The beautiful shore of Lake Superior held another adventure for us one day. I met Eric and Lynn through Eric's brother Rolf. Rolf was the one that got me into rock climbing a few years ago. When the four of us met in the City of Rocks in Idaho, I became fast friends with Lynn and Eric, and I love climbing with both of them. They have well over 30 years of experience in teaching rock climbing, and I won't even tell you how many years total experience they have.
Stick your butt out and put all your weight on it. Or not. Okay. Nice.
I guess you could say I'm having a little bit of fun here. And while it certainly is a long ways down, from up here the views are unbeatable. And after an awesome day climbing, you know where you can find us. The next day was back in Ely to give kayaking a try. We headed out into Burntside Lake, this beautiful, gorgeous body of water. Once you figure paddling out, there's something really rhythmic and peaceful about being out on the water. I didn't take a camera with me. It can be really risky getting in and out of the kayak, especially your first few times. I did a great job getting into the kayak. However, when it came to getting out of the kayak, I took a full plunge and completely submerged myself underwater. Lynn and Eric built a yurt outside of town. I expected it to be a bit of a glorified tent, with sleeping bags and maybe a propane stove to cook. Boy, I couldn't have been more wrong. It reminded me of my grandparents' and great-grandparents' trailer in Oklahoma, where I have so many wonderful childhood memories. Unsurprisingly, there's some cliffs nearby, and we did a bit of rock climbing, and then we set up some swinging chairs here and sat and enjoyed this spectacular view of the Boundary Waters wilderness. You can even see Canada way off in the distance. Not that I need an excuse, but I did not take enough photos and videos during my time with Lynn and Eric. So I am definitely heading back to Ely to spend more time with them and to wander around the gorgeous country that's up here. Before I headed out, there was one more thing I absolutely had to do. I needed to go and meet Grayson, Rika, Blackstone, and Kaz at the International Wolf Center in Ely, Minnesota. While it may look very tempting to head over and pet these beautiful creatures, or maybe even cuddle with them, these are still top of the food chain, keystone predators that are extremely dangerous. They are occasionally given treats, in this case pig's ears, to coax them to come up close to the humans, who are behind a very thick layer of glass to protect us and to protect the wolves. I have always been captivated by wolves, and to come here and to get to be so close to these beautiful, majestic creatures was like a dream come true. While these wolves are captive, they still form up into a pack just like they would in the wild, and they display dominant and submissive behaviors. I easily could have spent hours and hours watching them. As you would imagine, the center also has wonderful programming, including films and educational centers where you can learn about wolves. They also have wonderful displays on the life cycles of wolves, how wolves hunt, and various other information about these beautiful creatures. They also trace the timeline in mankind's effort to eradicate the wolf, and our efforts to reintroduce these beautiful animals back into their natural environment. Plus, they highlight some of the efforts that humans are making to coexist with these creatures, even in areas where livestock are raised. I need to go back and capture a bit more of the information from the various displays and exhibits that were going on at the center. This trip, I seem to have been completely focused on capturing videos and images of these spectacular, gorgeous creatures. Honestly, I was so honored to be able to spend so much time so close to one of my very favorite animals in the world. It's always so bittersweet saying goodbye to good friends. I had so much fun and so enjoyed my time with Lynn and Eric. I greatly appreciate them showing me around Ely and providing me with new and interesting experiences. I know I'll be back to Ely because this part of the country is so much more beautiful and so much more fascinating than I ever imagined. But for now, it's time to get this adventure on the road. So as I headed out of Ely, I headed toward Lake Superior once again. If it looks like this path going down Highway 1 is a little bit of a curvy, windy path, let me tell you, it really is. Growing up in Kansas and then moving to Colorado meant that I hadn't really spent a ton of time around big water. Certainly I'd been around lakes and definitely had visited the ocean a few times, but Lake Superior, which is fresh water, actually 10% of the Earth's fresh water, was a new experience for me. And one of the things that I really wanted to go and check out and explore while I was here were lighthouses. So my first stop was Split Rock Lighthouse. In 1905, the Mataafa storm on Lake Superior sunk or damaged 29 ships. Building the lighthouse was a bit of a challenge as there were no roads in the area. So everything from construction material to construction workers had to be shipped in by water and craned up the side of the cliff. By 1924, it was such a popular tourist destination that roads were finally built to reach the lighthouse. Homes also had to be built for the lighthouse keeper and his assistants and their families. They've restored one of the houses, and you can head on in and wander around and check out what life may have been like for those people who kept the lighthouse working. They had many of the amenities and most of the things that you would expect if you lived in a city. However, they were quite isolated out here until that road was built. Most of the lighthouse keepers were married and had children, so of course, the children grew up here on the grounds of the lighthouse. I suppose you're wondering whether or not I went up in the lighthouse. Well, that's kind of a silly question. Of course I did. And, whoops, speaking of kids, here's one in my way. So once the little dude was out of my way, I flipped my camera and started heading up these narrow, curvy stairs. And you are not going to believe what I forgot to do. When I got to the top, I got all wrapped up in the mechanism that drives the Fresnel light, and I completely forgot to take any videos or pictures out of the window. I know, pretty sad, but it was really interesting. They also had a working model of it in the museum attached to the lighthouse, and maybe that was part of why I got so wrapped up when I got to the top. Now, this is a state park in Minnesota. The lighthouse is kept up by the Historical Society, and the state maintains a whole bunch of different trails. And as you can imagine, some of these trails have some pretty spectacular views. Before roads reached the lighthouse, a dock and tramway was built to make it easier to bring supplies up to the lighthouse. Today, that tramway is completely shot, but they have built a staircase that you can take and walk all the way down to the water. When I reached the bottom, I found a comfortable place to sit and just sat for a little while taking some pictures and listening to the waves. Of course, I also spent a little bit of time gazing out and wondering what would it be like to get into a sailing ship and sail across this massive body of water. While I was a bit tired from the driving and all of the tromping around on the lighthouse grounds, I had one more stop to make at Gooseberry Falls. Of course, I had to wander up and see the falls from a little bit higher vantage point. And when I saw that there were more waterfalls, I continued tromping to check out each of the waterfalls in succession. Thoroughly wiped out from a long day, I headed a little bit further down the road to some dispersed camping near Castle Danger. I was a little bit nervous as I headed into the forest. A few weeks before, I'd been in the Chippewa National Forest, also in Minnesota, and headed down a road that was marked as a place where you could camp by the Forest Service. However, that road started out looking about like this. Seemed like a pretty good place to go camping. But before long, it began to get a little bit more dense, and then a little bit more dense, and then I almost couldn't get out. So when I saw the road that led to the dispersed camping area, I pulled over, locked up the Jeep, and wandered up this road until I made it all the way to the place where I was going to camp, just to make sure that I wasn't going to end up in a situation where I might need somebody else to come in and get me out. This wasn't too bad to go into, but it was a little bit on the bumpy side, but once I got in there, it was absolutely beautiful, and I totally enjoyed the one night that I spent here. So let's go for a little drive in the forest with my trailer hooked on the back of my Jeep and go find this pretty cool spot that I found for one night. I think I'll speed it up here a little bit so that we can get to the campsite. It did take me a few minutes to drive up this road, but we don't want to sit here forever watching this beautiful forest, do we? I promise we'll get there. No, really, we will get there. Let me speed it up just a little bit more then. All right, we are almost there. All I got to do is pull up to the right here to this campsite and put the Jeep in a good place to where I'm about level. That'll do it. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Exploring the Unexpected as we check out a couple more Lake Superior lighthouses, wander 2,000 feet into the earth at the Quincy Mine, and spend some time on the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula.